When my mom slapped a printed invoice onto the dinner table demanding $30,000 in back rent, I thought it was a sick joke. But then my dad leaned in, dead serious, and added, "Your first $2,000 payment is due Sunday, or we're taking your car keys and selling it to cover the debt. And we're tacking on 10% interest every month, just like a real landlord." My sister burst out laughing, and my aunt called me an ungrateful bum for taking advantage of my own parents. They sat there smug, convinced they had me trapped and stripped of every bit of leverage I had. What they didn't realize was that I wasn't holding onto my car or staying in that house out of desperation. I was staying because I had been quietly subsidizing their entire life. I didn't argue. I packed my bag, took my keys, and left that exact night. Exactly 7 days later at 1 a.m., my phone blew up with desperate messages. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Amber. I'm 28 years old, and until a week ago, I thought my family actually cared about me as a human being. It happened during a regular Tuesday night dinner. The roast chicken was barely on the table when my mother set down a printed invoice right beside my plate demanding $30,000 for what she called back rent and administrative fees. Before I could even process what I was looking at, my father leaned across the table with a cold, calculating look in his eyes. "Your first $2,000 payment is due this Sunday, Amber," he said, tapping his finger on the table. "Or we're taking your car keys and selling it to cover the debt. And from now on, we're adding 10% interest every single month, just like a real landlord." My younger sister, who was sitting across from me, didn't even try to hide her amusement. She burst out laughing, taking a picture of my face on her phone. My aunt, who had conveniently shown up for dinner, scoffed and called me an ungrateful bum for taking advantage of my hardworking parents. They sat there smug and united, convinced they had backed me into a corner and stripped away every ounce of leverage I had. They thought I'd cry, beg, or start frantically writing a check. What they didn't realize was that they were staring at the person who had been secretly keeping their lives afloat. I didn't argue, and I didn't shed a single tear. I just stared back at them, quietly realizing that to these people, I was nothing more than an open wallet. Without saying a single word, I stood up from the dinner table, left my plate half full, and walked upstairs to my room. Downstairs, I could hear them laughing and congratulating themselves on finally putting me in my place. They thought I was going to my room to cry and figure out how to pull $2,000 out of thin air by Sunday. Instead, I locked my door, pulled out my large duffel bag, and began packing everything that actually mattered: my laptop, hard drives, legal identification, and tax records. My car was fully paid off, registered, and titled solely in my name, bought with my own hard-earned money years ago, despite what my parents tried to claim. What my family didn't know, what they had completely forgotten in their greed, was why I was living in that house in the first place. I wasn't staying there as a freeloading daughter. 2 years ago, after my late grandfather passed away, he left behind a private trust meant to help maintain the family property. Under a quiet agreement with the trust manager, I had been manually transferring money every month directly to cover the home mortgage, property taxes, home insurance, and main utilities. My parents thought the bank was automatically waiving things or that Dad's tiny side hustle was covering it. I zipped up my bag, walked down the back staircase, threw my things into the trunk of my car, and drove away into the night, leaving them to celebrate a victory that was about to ruin them. By midnight, I was settled into a quiet, furnished short-term apartment I booked on my phone while sitting in a coffee shop parking lot. The first thing I did after setting my bags down was log into my bank accounts. I severed every single shared credit card, removed my parents as authorized users, and canceled the scheduled automatic bank transfers that had been quietly paying off the house mortgage, property taxes, and utility bills every month. For the next 4 days, my phone was a nonstop stream of arrogant voicemails and text messages. My dad left a message on Thursday morning, his tone oozing fake authority. "Amber, we see you're throwing a tantrum, but running away won't erase your debt. Sunday is approaching fast. Have that $2,000 ready, or the tow truck is coming for your car." My mom texted me photos of local used car listings, reminding me how much money they planned to pocket once they sold my vehicle out from under me. They genuinely believed I was sleeping on a friend's couch, desperate, broken, and counting down the hours until I had to crawl back home to hand over my savings. They had no idea that while they were busy celebrating their imaginary financial windfall, the financial safety net keeping a roof over their heads had officially snapped. The mortgage payment was due on the 1st of the month, and for the first time in 2 years, nobody was paying it for them. By day 6, the peaceful illusion my parents had constructed around themselves completely shattered. That morning, an urgent notice arrived in the mail at their front door. It wasn't an advertisement or a routine notice. It was a formal bank alert detailing an immediate mortgage default, alongside an official warning of an impending tax lien on the property for unpaid real estate taxes. Up until that exact moment, my parents had convinced themselves that my father's minor consulting gigs were somehow covering the bills, or that the bank was simply being generous with extensions after Dad lost his primary corporate job a year ago. They were so blinded by their own entitlement that they never bothered to check the primary bank accounts, or question how a house with zero income attached to it was somehow staying afloat. Reading those official words, the truth finally smashed through my mother's delusion. I wasn't living under their roof as a helpless, freeloading daughter who owed them $30,000 in back rent. I was the silent engine funding their entire lifestyle. My payment transfers weren't just extra cash, they were the only reason the house hadn't been put up for auction months ago. The realization hit them like a freight train. The daughter they had tried to intimidate, extort, and strip of her dignity was the exact person holding the keys to their survival. And by demanding $2,000 and threatening to steal my car, they had officially destroyed the golden egg. Panic instantly settled over the household, replacing their smug arrogance with pure, unadulterated terror. At exactly 1 a.m. on day 7, my phone began vibrating continuously on my nightstand. The smug silence from the past few days vanished instantly, replaced by a flood of frantic notifications. First came a message from my sister, completely dropping the sarcastic, mocking tone she had used at the dinner table. "Dude, Mom found something in the mail. Please answer your phone right now. Things are really bad." 20 minutes later, at 1:23 a.m., my aunt texted me, her usual judgment replaced by sheer hysteria. "Amber, your mom and dad are sitting here in the living room sobbing. They are completely beside themselves. Please call them back immediately. You need to fix this." Then came the voice notes directly from my father. His voice, which had sounded so cold and demanding when laying down his 10% monthly interest rules, was now cracking with emotion. He was practically hyperventilating into the microphone, begging me to pick up, rambling about how there had been a huge misunderstanding with the bank, and asking if I could come back home so we could work things out as a family. I lay in my bed, watching the notifications light up the dark room, feeling a strange mix of detachment and quiet closure. Just 1 week prior, these exact people were laughing at my expense, threatening to strip away my independence and sell my car out from under me. Now, faced with the cold reality of their own actions, they were completely crumbling. I didn't reply to a single text or return any of the calls. I simply turned my phone onto silent, rolled over, and finally got a peaceful night's sleep. I agreed to meet my parents 2 days later at a quiet, neutral coffee shop downtown. When they walked in, they looked like ghosts of the confident people who had ambushed me at dinner. My mother's eyes were swollen from crying, and my father looked 10 years older, completely defeated. The moment they sat down, my dad looked up at me, his hands shaking slightly. "Amber," he pleaded, his voice stripped of all its former arrogance. "We're so sorry about how we handled things. It was a huge mistake. We need you to fix this mortgage issue right away before the bank takes the house." I didn't offer any comfort. Instead, I pulled up my official vehicle registration directly on my phone, clearly showing my name as the sole legal owner, and set it face up on the table for them to see. "You told me you were going to act like a real landlord," I said, my voice completely steady. "So I decided to act like an independent adult. The money I was paying didn't come from a freeloading daughter. It was the only reason you had a roof over your heads. But since you decided my presence here was worth a fake $30,000 debt, I've permanently closed those accounts." My mom started sobbing, begging me to reconsider and step up for the family. But I remained untouched. I gave them a final, formal verbal warning that all my financial ties to their property were severed forever, made it clear that my car was off limits, and walked out, leaving them alone with the cold truth of what they had brought upon themselves. In the months that followed, my family was forced to face the harsh reality they had spent years avoiding. Without my silent financial backing, they couldn't keep the house. They had to put the family home up for sale in a rush, sell off Dad's luxury items, and downsize to a small 2-bedroom rented apartment on the other side of town. My sister had to take on a full-time job to help cover their basic living expenses, and my aunt suddenly became very quiet, completely disappearing from family affairs once there was no longer any money or drama to feed off of. As for me, walking away was the hardest but best decision I've ever made. I used my savings to secure a beautiful, permanent apartment closer to my job. For the first time in my life, I am living in an environment free from toxic entitlement, manipulative guilt trips, and constant financial extortion. Setting that hard boundary cost me my relationship with my parents, but it saved my sanity and my future. When people try to use family as an excuse to disrespect, abuse, or control you, remember that you are never obligated to stay and be their target. What about you? What would you have done if your own parents demanded $30,000 in fake back rent and threatened to steal your car? Would you have stayed and fought, or walked away, like I did? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and check out the next story on your screen. Thank you for watching.